I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, August 1st, 2022. My, how fast the time goes. August 1st, a good time to think on special things in community. I mean, for example, did you know that today is International Mahjong Day? Cool, right? Today is also uh, National Girlfriends Day. That's cool. August 1st is also National Minority Donor Awareness Day. It's also National Raspberry Cream Pie Day. That's a lot. Last one. A good way to begin the program, a little smile. It's also, this is not funny, it's right. It's righteous. Today is National Respect for Parents Day. And that's something that all of us can subscribe to and support and live with. Uh, I'm Al McFarlane. I'm your host, and I'm glad to be here with my co-host and partners, Diana Hawkins and Dee Phillips. Diana and Dee are with the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council and join me every Monday, help me curate the program every Monday. And I appreciate them, their leadership, and their service to community through the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council. Diana, Dee, good afternoon, guys. How are you both today?
Hey, how you doing, Al? It's Monday again. It's nice day out there. The weather's not too hot, But I have to say this, tomorrow is National Night Out,
Mm.
and that's a night where you're supposed to get with your neighbors and fellowship, and just feel that vibe, family vibe. So to everyone that's listening, I am truly encouraging you to find a block club party, a national night out party, and just really come together with your neighbors.
There
So
we
I
go.
mean that's my great plug today, Al, instead of the wrongs clubs.
Uh, well, we got some stuff coming up this week too, or this month for Hawthorne, right?
Yes,
And
sir.
what are our two big dates for Hawthorne? And
Well, we have National Night Out coming up tomorrow, and just so people know, the first 50 kids that come to the Hawthorne office, 2944 Emerson, we're giving away backpacks, and they have school supplies in them. And then at the end of August, we are joining Mr. Tito Wilson down on Broadway for his Healthy Life and the other coalition. So that's going to be exciting.
okay,
And
sounds
I'm
good.
interested, and I'm very, very pleased to let you know that this Thursday, when you present the huddle, it will be 26 years old.
Amazing.
Yes,
Awesome. Well, good work. So
yes,
Thursday morning, 7:30
yes,
to 9, Hawthorne Huddle.
yes.
And mark your calendars, join it. It's an exercise, a reflection of what it means to be in community. We call the Monday program governance at the neighborhood level, and the Hawthorne Huddle is simply representative of that idea. So please join us on Thursday. Today's program is going to be a great program. I want to also acknowledge my writing partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray, who writes from her home in New Mexico. Brenda, how you doing?
Good afternoon. You look brighter, Dee. They added light to you. You look good on camera.
Oh, no, I don't, but thank you.
Good to see you, Brenda. How's everything? How's your weekend?
We're doing okay, just writing.
Okay, okay.
Just
Good, good. Keep it up.
writing.
Keep it up. Keep it up. Thank you. Thank you. Listen, today we've got a great program with another one of the candidates for Hennepin County Sheriff, and then another friend and stakeholder in developing and building community. Joe Banks is going to be joining us to talk about his candidacy for Hennepin County Sheriff. First of all, then after that, we're going to bring in Pat Sukum, who will talk about his work with big brothers and big sisters. And as we talk, Pat, you can also monitor this in the chat. And if there's something that you want to throw into the conversation with Joe, we'll bring you in earlier. Okay, so it's kind of always open, unscripted, and it's friendly. Our intent is to elevate, to promote, to demonstrate what constructive engagement is. So with that, let me bring in Joe Banks. Joe Banks, if I have the right bio pull up here, worked for the Lower Sioux Police Department. Is that you, Joe? Is that the right one?
Correct.
Worked for the Lower Sioux Police Department and became the first African-American police officer hired by the department. He went on to become a police chief at the Upper Sioux Police Department and served as the chief of the city of Morton. Let's see, pull the rest of it up. Morton is south or north?
Southwest.
Southwest, not Minnesota though.
Yes, Minnesota. It's southwest of the cities. Morton is Jackpot Junction, Minnesota's first casino, right? So the Lower Sioux Indian tribe is how Mystic Lake came to be.
Lower Sioux. Okay, got it. Okay. Well, your notes indicate that you're the co-founder of two nonprofits. One is called Twin Cities Recovery Project, and that is a project that is designed to support pathways to recovery. You've also created a group called Black Butterfly, which tries to assist young women of color who experience the criminal justice system getting their lives stabilized and back on track. So you're familiar with the challenges and the opportunities. Your notes say that you started your career in South suburban Illinois as a police explorer with the Boy Scouts of America, that you were a Marine, joining the Marine Reserves, and then you returned after your service to begin your career as a law enforcement officer, as a police dispatcher, and then later a part-time police officer. You came to Minnesota in 1993 and worked in security while you earned a law enforcement degree. You attended Central Lakes College in Brainerd and became Brainerd's first African-American police officer intern. And you also served with the Minnesota Army National Guard while completing your degree in criminal justice. One of your projects, it's a company, Banks Securities, Inc., assists in criminal expungement resources. You also are a media person. You do a podcast called Let's Talk About It, and that airs on Wednesdays from 4 to 5 on cable channel 6 and on Facebook. And presently you're working as a licensed bail bondsman. And so glad to have you here and good to meet you. Let me have you start, Joseph Banks, by telling your own story, your background, and in doing so, why you want to run for sheriff, why you are running for sheriff, why you want to be the sheriff of Hennepin County.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, I started from humble beginnings in South suburban Illinois, small village of Robbins. Back then, the police officers actually cared about what was happening with the community. They got involved. There were days when, I was frustrated and, couldn't make it to school. These guys would come by and give me that ride and give me motivation on how important it was to go get my education and what that meant to my future and things like that. Just keep me on a positive straight and narrow. So I really appreciated with that. They helped me to go to Chicago Youth Centers, which was a program that handled inner city troubled youth. And as a result of that, I was able to go to a camp called Camp Rosenthal in DeWijack, Michigan, where I learned to home in on my young leadership skills. And so we went through a little leadership training, and it also gave me a chance to focus on, the importance of my surname, right? And I learned that what I was living in wasn't my only environment, right? And it's what gave me my motivation to push and move forward to do bigger things. It also taught me to give back. So that was important, that learning to give back, because, once you learn to give back, you figure out, man, how I can make a difference. What's my contribution here, right? Not just taking, but what can I really do to make things better? And so as a result of that, I joined the Police Explorers, which is through the Boy Scouts of America. And as a result of that, I went on to become the Explorer Commander. And so my leadership training that I had gotten was beginning to take off and take shape. And I started learning, wow, okay, it's okay to be out front. It's okay to lead the way. And I found that, wow, I like it. I like being out in the front, like being the leader. And, just working with those guys, learning how cops did things. It taught me something I think is important in law enforcement today, which is people come first, right? It's important that we learn that we're dealing with people on a daily basis, And so I think somewhere in translation over the years that's gotten lost. We used to have to protect and serve on the side of the squad cars. We no longer have that. And so with that being lost was the message that we need to be giving good customer service to our people, right? And so the reason why I'm running for sheriff is because I noticed that over the years, we don't have a uniform consistency with different law enforcement agencies in the community. And as a result of that, in situations like the George Floyd and things like that, we were not all on the same page. So I knew that we needed to have a consistency across the board. Now, the state says we train everyone the same way, but the consistency that we didn't have is the expectations of what the sheriff has put out for each police department to be on the same page. And so that's where we're different. And so it's important that my message get out there, which is, one, cops don't have to arrest everybody. Right? Not a lot of people know that we don't have to arrest everybody unless there's a warrant or someone has died. You have discretion or authority. And in poverty-stricken communities, this is a real important tool because young people of color enter the system through that officer. And so as a result of that, they can't get housing, they can't get employment, they can't get education. And this causes our recidivism rate to increase. So it's important that our cops understand that you could have made the arrest, but do you have to? So my thought is always, is this a teachable moment or is this an arrestable moment? So these are the things that I'm trying to implement moving forward as the sheriff of Hennepin County, is to make sure that we're telling the truth, we have that transparency, and then we're all working on the same page. And so
let me interrupt you to drill in a little on that, and thank you for making that observation. And because I think, like me, we don't really, most average people don't think about the discretionary power of officers. We know it exists, but we think that, I'd say the common person thinks, and I'll call myself common, that, a cop kind of has to arrest you, or a cop acts like he or she must arrest you. We have that feeling. But then we also know that, and we feel that white cops tend to let white people go, but not black people go. And so there's this sense of a double standard where, where we know, there's a compassion. So a kid does something, speeding, and the cop pulls him or her over and says, get out of here, go home, and don't let me stop you again. Black kid, same thing happens. She can expect to be ticketed, charged, maybe arrested. He or she fears they'll get beat up. So there's a whole different range. So talk about that more, because I'm glad to hear you say and talk about discretions that officers have, that they're not forced to just because there's a warrant.
Right.
They have to arrest you. Or does it?
It's so important that we impact that on our officers, because we do teach officers to have control, right? And when we talk control, we're talking control of the environment in order to keep people safe. But what we want people to understand is that control doesn't always mean physical control. And so we need to slow things down a bit so officers know when the need to disengage, right? Knowing the scope of your training. In some situations where there are therapists required, if the person is combative, but it contained in a house or an apartment where they're not causing anyone else harm, then we can slow things down and get proper people there. We don't necessarily have to engage. And that comes into play when you're serving warrants, when you're dealing with people on traffic stops. So, over the last few months, this big thing of no-knock warrants, and that has come up. my philosophy applies in all of those situations, because when you think knock or no knock warrant, we still have to give people time to acknowledge our presence, right? That means that I need to slow things down. I get to control things because I'm here, right? And so I get to give people information, knock on the door, say, hey, announce my presence, give them a chance to acknowledge my presence, to decide if they want to come out, if they want to surrender. I can also give verbal commands and allow them to come to me, because outside is where I have the advantage. Entering those situations unnecessarily creates situations where you do end up feeling threatened, because now you've closed the distance, right? And in that particular situation, in my opinion, the young man was asleep. Whether he had a gun or not didn't matter, because at that point he was in the house, he was asleep. He could have gone to sleep with that gun. He hadn't committed a crime. And as a result of that, we obviously was thinking that there was more than one location. So we got to treat that with kid gloves. Plus, we got to consider the totality of the people who live in other apartments who may be in that apartment. So things like that is where we impact on that. In terms of this discretion,
let me ask a question again there. So
Yeah.
in that case, is it a question when officers decide to move quickly in an intervention or in a search warrant or whatever? Is it because they want to make sure that either nobody inside is in danger of being held or held against their will, or because they don't want an escape? Or is it because they don't want evidence destroyed or tampered with? I mean, I can imagine my television knowledge saying that cops at the door flush the drugs down the toilet. Is that something that drives or motivates an officer to make sure that once he or she announces, he or she barges in to preserve any possible evidence? What is it?
It's a little bit of both. When you look at the old training, which teaches us we need to rush, we need to get in there, we need to get in there and stop them from destroying the evidence. We need to, those things are the old trainings that we got, and those are the old methods that we're continuing to still use. What we should be looking at is, what exactly am I pursuing this person for? Okay. And what are the potential risks prior to going in there? We like to have a better understanding of the layout of the apartment, the layout of the house, who's coming and going from the house. Unless it's a situation where the person's in an active, aggressive assault, you have the time to do that homework, and that's important that you do that. And so once you have this information, then you decide, do we need to breach a person's door, right? Because we're here to serve a warrant. If we have the place surrounded properly, right? Once we've announced our presence, the person is now aware that we're on the property. Two things are going to happen, and we call that fight or flight, right? Either the person's going to say, okay, you know what, they got me, I'm surrendered, I'm coming peacefully, or they're going to decide, nope, you got to come in and get me. But you've given them that time to acknowledge your presence. You've taken that time to acknowledge the safety of people around there, and you've taken the most important thing into consideration, and that's the importance of life, right? We want to do our best to make sure that people survive our encounters, right? We're not saying that they won't make mistakes, they won't make bad choices. The goal is to use necessary force to keep them safe and still control the environment. And that's what we need to be doing. And that's what we haven't been doing. The problem with that is that a lot of the departments have their own separate training programs, right? And no one's putting an eyeball on that. When you look at the sheriff is the top cop in the county. It's his responsibility to make sure that the departments are meeting those standards. That doesn't mean sit in your office every day and talk to different people, but actually get out, go talk to the police chiefs, go talk to the community, find out what's being said or what's not happening, see what you can do to help those departments strengthen their weaknesses, because that's the only way we're going to figure out what's going wrong. And be willing to admit when it's wrong, right? We know people make mistakes. And so it's okay to admit when we get it wrong. It's one of the reasons why I've suggested having a malpractice insurance like doctors have, because it'll offset some of the costs that our citizens are facing when these officers make bad decisions. It's not going to cost officers a whole lot more money. We already take what's called para out of their checks for, retirement funds. We take a little bit out for unions, right? We can take a tiny bit out to make sure that the citizens aren't picking up the complete dime for bad decision making. And
You're
so,
the first cop I've ever heard advocate making cops pay for insurance. I haven't heard that from any other law enforcement officer.
yeah, because I want to advocate for that, because just like when doctors make a mistake, people sometimes die. Our job puts us in a position when we make decisions that go wrong, sometimes people die. And so we have to be able to put that ball on our back as well, and not just throw it in the citizen's face and go, yeah, the city will cover the cost of that mistake.
Yeah, the concept is called qualified immunity. And under
Yeah.
the concept of qualified immunity, if I understand it correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, officers are basically not accountable. Whatever they do, they can say, I thought this was going to happen and therefore I killed this person, or whatever it is, but they are immune from lawsuits.
Right.
And the city, therefore, the county or the town is left holding that liability if there's a civil lawsuit and an award, not the officer. And the argument that has been advanced from the community, from various sectors of it over time, is that if you had an elimination of the qualified immunity, you would require that officers, number one, be eligible to be insured, and that a person that was a bad actor would have to pay more or not likely be insurable, and therefore you eliminate people whose history is a history of
Right.
bad acting from being a liability to themselves, to the public, and to the county and to taxpayers. Is that a fair description?
That is a fair description. And when we do that, we back that up with the fact that we're creating a database that will actually track those bad actors in the process of their career. And so what this would allow us to do as the sheriff department is to see that information in real time, because it's getting reported directly from those departments. And to back that up, we're actually going to assign a deputy or two specifically to those departments to that function. Now, the sweet part on the back end is that not only can we see it, but the transparency piece will allow the citizens to see it in real time as well. This will allow us to collect any data out there that we've missed and the citizens have seen, so that we can together review it with the citizen review board and decide how to move forward with charges, whether to let the post board know that there's an issue here. And it also prevents an officer from leaving one department and going to another department because he was allowed to self-terminate in lieu of being fired. So this is an important piece that we want to push.
Okay, great. What were your experiences as an officer trainee and officer at Lower Sioux? Talk about that position.
Yeah, that position was a really fun position. We had lots of training. The thing that I took from the Sioux community was, one, multicultural, right? We dealt with a lot of different cultures, which means you had to be cultural sensitive. We did a lot of cultural sensitivity training. You were taught to learn the culture so you didn't offend people unknowingly, right? You had to learn to work with our federal and state partners, because out there is what we call public law 280. So you have tribal law, you have state and federal law, right, that you have to enforce, and you have to be able to balance those laws and still be productive. So it was a lot of good training. We had a similar population to like Hennepin County, because we're constantly seeing tourists on a different basis every day. Uniquely enough, in the rural areas out there, a lot of people come out there thinking because it's so far out that they can get away with more. I can come out here and hide, I can do my dirt. And then they find out that we're a little bit more advanced in technology and they go, oh, wait a minute, this wasn't necessarily the best choice for them, right? Because in the casinos, we have thousands of cameras, different angles. Squad cars were equipped with it. We were equipped with digital technology way before it started being mass used in the inner city. So a lot of our systems were automatically downloaded once we pulled into the department. It was already downloaded, so we didn't have to worry about an officer accessing or changing, video that may have been questionable. So, and then that third piece was balancing tribal governments, right? That is that civil piece, because with tribal governments there comes instant change, and so sometimes you have to be prepared to handle volatile change in a short amount of notice, and so that does happen. I think what I did like the best part though was that our federal partners really chipped in issues that involved firearms, fires, things of that nature. And you really learn the importance after going down, meeting with these guys and seeing exactly what their capability was, how you could use them to your best advantage. The ATF has the ability to track a gun from start to finish, right? They can recover serial numbers off a gun that's been scratched off, right? And so you start learning, wow, and when you in situations like when you're in the inner city and you got a gun issue, you should want to know the history of where this gun came from, because that's how you're going to find who had it, right? And as you can see, my biggest complaint with what's happening now in the metro is that we decided to arrest people for the switch that comes to the gun, right, and charge them federally in lieu of going after the folks who are making it readily available on the internet for $19, right? So we're kind of working backwards there, right? So and this is the unique part I've learned over the years of being in law enforcement. Before it was, yes, go get the drug dealers, right? We figured out that we were arresting street hustlers, not major drug dealers. And so our prisons are full of street hustlers, right? And we're running out of space for violent offenders because of that. And so we have to look at, did actually arresting the guy who was selling a couple bags of dope on the corner make a major impact? Or should we have actually pursued the person who was bringing the poundage and heavyweights in? Should we have looked at getting people who had addictions, the assistance they needed in lieu of sending them to jail, things of that nature? And that's how I ended up being a founder of Twin Cities Recovery Project, because I started looking at the fact that most of the people in jail, good 80% of them, were either opiate addicted or mental health issues. And so if we never address those issues, we're going to always be arresting the same people again and again and again and again.
Well, that's thank you for being clear on that. I think that's a clear, my cynicism is that the system often knows exactly what it's doing, and it becomes a business. It becomes a revenue stream. It's cash flow. And so Black people and poor people, addicted people, then become the new product. Move them in, move them out, and charge it to the taxpayer, grow our staff, grow our armament, grow our whatever else we want. But we're doing this at the expense of the public at large, and we're not really solving the problem. That is restoring people that are experiencing some kind of trauma, damage, something that guides them to lack of productivity and even to danger for themselves and for their community. We're not addressing those issues. And I think you're saying the same thing.
Yep. That's it. And then when I look back over my career, that was the first thing I thought, how did I make a difference? Where did we make a difference at? And I started looking at things like, okay, so if you look at the police mentality that we kind of grew up in, it was go after the criminals. They're using drugs. They must be criminals, right? We have to remember that we're talking about people who have decided to self-medicate for whatever reason. So you have to address that issue. We want people to come to the police, right? So we started modeling our program after a program that's called PARI, right? And that's Police Assistant Recovery Initiative, right? Addiction Recovery Assistant. So we needed to figure out how could we give cops the ability to get people into treatment in lieu of arrest. And so we looked at that program and said, yeah. So we ended up with a program called MARI, Minnesota's version of that. Now, when I expanded on that, I said, wait a minute, we don't have to even complicate it that much, because we were trying to figure out how could we put together legislation like some of our other states who have come up with legislation. And I said, wait a minute, we still have discretional authority, right? Discretional authority simply says, I don't got to take the guy to jail. I can offer the guy services, right? All we need to do is to make sure that we're partnering up with these programs that are providing services so we have a place for them to go.
Does that happen or does it not happen?
It's starting to happen now for us because we've partnered up with.
Let me throw an example out. So North Minneapolis has, you might know, Dr. Peter Hayden over at Turning Point. And for the longest time, organizations, institutions that could refer Black people with chemical dependency issues would not refer them to Turning Point. Turning Point's specialty is that it is owned and situated in the Black community, run by Black people, counselors, Black people. It's a network that really is a network in the community that most of the offenders and the traumatized or violators come from and certainly will return to. But the systems preferred to direct those people who needed help to white organizations, not to Black organizations. What about that?
Oh, that's been a hurdle that I encountered even when I started the nonprofit. Right, was so when they say that we're helping people of color, it generally includes other cultures, and so you have to really lock them into. Do you mean Native Americans, Hispanics? Do you mean specifically set aside for Black people? And why is it set up so that when Black people are giving dollars, they have to qualify? So these are the things that we encountered along the way. And so we started trying to figure out, okay, how can we bridge that gap? We partnered up with the Hazel and Betty Ford Foundation. One of the reasons was because they had received almost $2 million in money for opiate addiction, but we needed to qualify for it. And I said, well, this shouldn't happen. You know what I mean? We should have the ability to access this money for people who actually in need. And if dying in the community is not enough to qualify, I don't know what else is. So, when you look at this stuff in real time and you're out here, we do outreach in the community. We're out at these homeless encampments. We're out, we're doing partnerships with tiny houses to try to get people housing. We're walking with people through the pathway to mental health assistance, finding out that there's so many barriers in between to prevent them from actually getting the help they need. And so when you see it firsthand, you begin to understand kind of what the fix needs to come in place. Legislation has a set way that they want to do things. And if the people don't get involved and hold them accountable, it's going to continue the way it's always continued. Turning Point has been around. They've done a lot of good work. We've partnered with them on a few projects as well. But it's important that people understand that if you don't know what's happening, you can't change it. We have to do a little bit more than just get angry. We have to organize, put a plan to follow through in place, and then actually get the right folks at the table to develop a bill into a law and follow through. And that's what we haven't had happen.
Thank you for being with me today. Hang around because I want you to be part of the next conversation as well, particularly because you've done a lot of your foundational work as a volunteer with the Boy Scouts of America, I think, and through other youth serving organizations. I want to bring in Pat Sukum, who is the executive director of Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Twin Cities. Pat, good afternoon. How you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see everyone here as well. Thanks for having me.
Just jump right in the same conversation we're having because you're on the front end of the arena of trauma. A lot of young children, boys and girls, without guidance and without connectivity, find themselves lost, traumatized, and on a path that will put them in conflict with their families, their neighbors, the neighborhood, with society, which will end up with encounters with police or the sheriff's department. And so from your point of view, how important is it for us to have conversations like this about the role, the philosophy, the leadership of the law enforcement apparatus for Hennepin County in particular, but in general? What do you think, Pat Sukum?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, love the conversation. Joe, thanks for your comments. Absolutely around pulling in community into the conversation, getting upstream, right? Really looking at the root problem. I think it's important. And, I was talking with someone on your team, just, in general, we've had mentoring programs, even specifically where we've worked with law enforcement as mentors for youth in schools, right? We've done that for about a decade, seen huge impact about it, but it all really changed around the murder of George Floyd, right? And clearly all knowing that sort of these pieces were in place, but heightened when that activity occurred, or that murder occurred. And it really changed how the community even saw how we interacted with police, right? There was definitely perspective, some of them sort of on both sides of the extreme, a lot of villainization, those kind of pieces. And, even Joe, I'm kind of curious, I assume the last few years of policing for you have felt very different, community impact again on both extremes, and would be interested to hear your thoughts on how do we navigate? How do we sort of come together? How do we make sure that we are sort of not living in these extreme magnified perspectives? And again, finding that path to less villainization, both directions, right? We're seeing it sometimes from how the stereotypes we have of police, but also the stereotypes we might have of our youth, and needing to break that down.
Yeah, when I look at that, it comes down to education and understanding, right? So on my show, I don't know if you've seen my show, but on my show, I do this little part when I call the backpack, right? That backpack is just giving folks a tool that, hey, a lot of us are sending our kids out the door telling them they should be confrontational with law enforcement when they're confronted. And we have to let them know that, listen, let's stay calm. Let's let these officers go through their spiel. If it's something that we need to address, we'll do it at a later date and time, because the goal is that your encounter still sends you home. I don't want kids feeling like, I need to buck up against these officers and then they're getting unnecessarily assaulted or shot and killed. So this is important because we have to make sure that they have these proper tools when they're out here functioning in the world. And so, with the George Floyd situation, I look at it like this here. There's a few factors there. One, there hadn't been a spotlight on law enforcement like this since Emmett Till and back, and so things of that nature, and going way back to the March on Selma. And so, I put things in time blocks, right?
Rodney King.
Yes, and that's a prime example because it's a 3-year box that we have. We got 3-year box to really actually be active and bring change, right? We're nearing that with the George Floyd situation. And if we're not careful, it's going to be another, well, remember when that happened, but nothing came. And so when the bill came and no one actually followed through and they didn't work it out to get some type of change, we should have been back at the table requesting that we still work on it. It's gotten swept aside. And so in another few months, it'll be, that was just like Rodney King. It happened, but now we've moved on. And what does that look like for us? So we have to take this time to educate our folks on, listen, the people have the power, right? In order for us to have that change, we have to come together. We have to organize as a community. We have to have a good plan, collaborative plan between law enforcement and community, right? We have to be willing to work together on both sides. We can't have cops who figure it's us against them, right? Some of the good old boys, some things you can fix, other things you just have to rid yourself of. And so I can't stick a young kid in a car with a guy I know who has a different philosophy, and he's going to be teaching that to this kid, right? And so we have to change that. Remember that Derek Chauvin was a situation that should have been taken care of way before it got to George Floyd, right? I don't know how we're holding him accountable and not the leadership. And I've always said that, because if I knew that something's bad and I still stuck it out there, I share some of the blame, right? And they knew that this guy was bad, but they never pulled him out of the loop, right? And it kept going on and going on. And George Floyd was the end result of it going too far. But I still look at the fact that had the young girl not recorded the video, they was already prepared to move forward with a story that was going to pacify the situation yet again, right? And so what would the world look like if that video hadn't came forward? And so that comes down to integrity, right? So this is what I tell cops. When we started the job, it was about telling. It was about telling. That is the main course of the job, right? That you will tell. This hidden blue line of silence, it needs to be gone, right? Because if you're not willing to stand up and tell on what's happening and you allow this to be swept under the carpet, you're just as bad. And so we have to push that. That's what we do. That's what cops do. We're trained to tell, right? And that means sometimes you may have to tell on the guys that you're working with, right? And technically, yeah, Derek Chauvin should have been arrested at the scene, right? Why did it take us all this time? Anyone who saw that we teach cops that when the handcuffs go on, the fight is over. Even if the guy's being passively resistant by saying, I don't want to get in the squad car. If you think there's a medical need, let's get the paramedics here. It's okay for him to lean against the squad car. What is the rush to get him in the car? So we have to look at what we're doing, right? So I'm always telling cops, do your best to make sure things are better when you left than they were when you got there, right? Did you come to work today wanting to make things better? Right? Because you have some officers who are out there trolling, but do you really want to make a positive impact in the community? Yes, there are going to be situations where we have to respond quickly with some aggression in some cases. We're in a situation right now with gun violence being at an all-time high. So yes, there are going to be some situations where we have to take some people down and do what we have to do, but people still get their integrity. They still get their respect. And after we've dealt with that situation, we go back to showing them that same respect and dignity. That's how we.
Pat, jump in back here. Thank you for the question, first of all. Joe, thank you for the response. This is really a fascinating exchange, and I think it makes for the best kind of program possible. So thanks to both of you guys. Pat, talk about your value proposition to boys and girls and to families with big brothers and big sisters, and how do you create a situation where these children and these families feel like they're equity owners in the governance of community, of their own lives, of society, and that they have a relationship that is proper, appropriate with law enforcement, but with electeds, with business owners, with teachers, with their friends, and with people downstream from them, where the whole is positive, productive, and nurturing, where healing is the both mission and byproduct of interaction. What do you do to make that happen at Big Brothers and Big Sisters?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I mean, so at the highest level, and I assume everyone's sort of familiar with Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we do mentoring, right? So we take youth, we match them with a volunteer adult. Clearly, we see the value and studies show, the increased resilience of having additional caring adults in your life for all youth. And so if you think about our program, it really is about building a relationship, right? I really like how Joe spoke to, we're trying to get upstream, right? We're trying to get to the root of this. So a lot of what our program does is it brings individuals together, right? It brings individuals sometimes from different worlds. Yeah, there's my little brother. We were at the Metrodome, if everyone remembers that place, in 1998 when we met. Still hugely impactful in my life. Still a big part of my life. He was best man in my wedding, right? These are the kind of relationships that we're looking to create. And they don't all last. Ours has lasted 24 years and ongoing. They don't all last like that, but it's about creating an arc to a story, right? Making sure there's impact. And it starts, like you would expect. You're showing up. You're being consistent, right? It's that piece that slowly builds into trust. And then when you have that trust that's where you're able to impact each other, challenge each other, find the spaces to get into the harder, if you will, or more challenging conversations, right? And then start to, again, look at worlds in different ways, different perspectives. And I mean it for both the big and the little, right? We have lots of statistics on the littles. Littles in our program skip school less substance abuse, are arrested at a lower rate, right? Higher graduation rate. But we have the statistics for our bigs as well, right? 80% feeling more connected to their community, feeling that they're learning different experiences, especially when we talk around inclusion, right? When we talk about ultimately compassion and perspective, right? Over 50% of bigs saying being a mentor helps with my mental health, right? So we want to make sure we're creating a structure where it's going both ways, right? It wasn't about me saving Derek, my little, in 1998. It's really about being able to go in and learn community and perspective. And then to Joe's point, how that builds, right? Gets out of our heads of these stereotypes and these extreme perspectives we have, and they are just enforced in today's society, in social media, what have you, and really getting to that bigger why. And so again, strongly built in this relationship, but you can see how once you have that trust created and you're creating relationships. I think about Derek, grew up on Broadway in Russell. Prior to meeting Derek, I'd probably been in North Minneapolis half a dozen times, right? I'm a Minnesota kid. Ended up spending every weekend there for the next decades of my life, as well as him spending time in my neighborhoods, right? And I think, again, this growth and this learning, and I just never would have had this relationship, these perspectives, again, this different sense of compassion without it. And that's really sort of the goal that we want to create in this arc to this story.
Mm-hmm.
Are kids getting a bad rep? Pat, what do you see with the children that show up looking for mentors and connections? The sense I have is that it's a part of our community that says kids are out of control, and they look at the aberrations as the norm. What's the aberration? It's the carjackers, and it's this dangerous gunplay where people are getting killed. And they look at that and say, all kids are a problem now. That's one thing. Or they see young moms in grocery stores cussing out 2-year-olds, and they shake their head and they say, oh boy, as a community, we're in trouble. And so our kids getting a bad rep, our families getting a bad rep. Is the reality different from those extreme examples of failure that are real, that are in community? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's actually something we struggle with. We're working through. I mean, I think it's, again, these sort of extreme perspectives, right, that we talked about, and you're hitting on just another element of it. And I think even if I think about Big Brothers Big Sisters, so nationally we're 120 years old, right? And I think sort of that mentality has been created over the last century, this saviorism, this stereotyping the youth we work with, right? This saviorism, the problematic issues there. And I think absolutely that is something we need to deconstruct, right? And ultimately it goes down to listening to our youth, right? It's not about me thinking, oh, I know the one path to success for all youth in all communities, and everyone has to follow it, right? It's how do we make sure we're listening to our youth to help them find their path to success, and frankly, their definition of success. And so I think that's a lot of the work we are engaging in, is how do we make sure to include that voice in our program? Because I do think inherently we're creating this saviorism mentality. I actually think, Al, you put it really well. It's as the leader of this organization, absolutely, I want people to support us, to help us, to donate to us, to volunteer in a greater sense. But we have to move away from this idea that it's the right thing to do. And don't get me wrong, it is the right thing to do. But it goes beyond that, and it's really how we're investing in our community, because it impacts all of us, right? It's not me helping somebody over there that I'm never going to see again, that I've stereotyped in this certain way that I would never be a part of, right? It's really saying how we're investing to say, when you invest in youth, all youth, what are you doing to build resiliency, build stronger families, build stronger and safer communities, build more diverse and stronger workforces, right? We work with many large corporations and industries, and we want them to know, how many bigs and littles you have in your company already, and how many more that can come and be stronger employees, right? This impacts you directly. And we want to make sure that we're creating that tie around the investment you put in, not just dollars. Again, you're throwing over a fence or volunteers hours to save someone. It has a direct impact on you and your larger world around you.
Any questions from Diana or Brenda or Dee of either Pat or of Joe? Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Diana.
Pat, I just want to throw this out there. What you said is really, really true. Because I want to go back, and Al, if you remember back in the early 2000s when we were mentoring, we were not only mentoring Pat youth, but we did a buddy system and we mentored elders and we put them together. You remember that, Al? So what you said is so true. It's not about the dollars. It's about that passion and what did you have to offer, you know what I mean, to one another. So thank you for saying that.
Dee, any thoughts or comments or questions? Brenda? Dee? Brenda?
I just wanted to ask Joe. I live in New Mexico, so I know very little about Minnesota law, but has the training for incoming police officers, young cadets, has it changed any, becoming more culturally relevant to what's going on today, and especially in the aftermath of the televised execution of George Floyd?
So in my experience, what I've seen so far is the dial has moved, but not much, right? We're guilty of pretending that we're changing, buying time, right? We're not actually moving the dial because we don't want to make people mad, right? Here, what we have is the reason why I'm running independently is for that reason, because we have people who are afraid that if they make real changes, they're going to lose their jobs, right? And I think in order for you to make real change, you got to be willing to lose your job, because it's not going to just happen with suggestions. A prime example, our large police departments in the state require that the cops go through a completely separate academy, even after they've already met the state standards, right? This is costing the cities a lot of money. In a lot of cases, we're washing out cops through personal injury, physical injury, while trying to continue on. And then the process of actually getting them trained where they need to be could have been limited to maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks of in-departmental training, because the job requires continued education. So do we really need to send them to a separate academy and teach them, quote unquote, how we do things in that department? It's almost a hazing phase, right? And so we have to change that mentality. It has not changed over the years. And the sheriff department has not taken a closer look at what's going on. And we're not being honest about things. Prime example, we just had the Supreme Court say that Minneapolis needed to get their cop numbers up based on the population of people. Then how do we have a sheriff department that has 270 patrol deputies for a population of 1.3 million people, right? How effective are you? You can throw out the numbers and say, oh yeah, we got 800 employees. We're talking about clerks and inner correction deputies. But in terms of actually bagging up the cops, what are your real capability of doing that when you don't have the manpower, when you haven't actually budgeted it with the commissioners what we really need to be effective in the community? You know, we're paying the state patrol $400,000 for something that they're supposed to have already budgeted for, right? Why are we giving you extra money? The city of Minneapolis, the county of Hennepin sits in the state of Minnesota, right? Just last December, the governor said that we didn't have the ability to have troopers inside the city of Minneapolis. What's changed, right? We figured out a way to come up with money. I mean, we have to have the sheriff buy in at the table, making these changes when it comes to officer training, officer education, and collaboration between the community. The community should have a buy-in.
What's the difference in the job, Joe, of the sheriff's department and the police department? Where are they distinct and different, and where do they overlap?
So the way I tell people is this: the sheriff is responsible for safety in the county, whether you got a police department or not, right? The police is a caveat for the sheriff, right? Because that means that they're working technically under the sheriff's authority with the systems of the city so that they can handle things more efficiently and more effectively, right? But they still fall under the sheriff department. The sheriff, if you look at smaller counties, the sheriff and the patrol deputies work side by side, right? When you talk to guys in Minneapolis, there is a distinct separation where you have deputies in the area who won't take calls, right? And how is that affecting the city? When a person's calling for help and they're being placed on hold and there's a person 2 blocks away who won't respond because he's serving subpoenas, we have a problem, right? The goal is to keep things safe and just be clear about it. When we were talking about defunding the police department in the city of Minneapolis, had they actually did that, they were going to have less control of what happened in the city, not more, because the sheriff doesn't answer to the city of Minneapolis, right? And so they would have had less say in what happened. There was still going to be law enforcement in the city, but the sheriff never came out and said that, right? He never came out and told people, you're still going to be safe. I'm still responsible to make sure you're safe, and here's our plan to keep you safe while this is happening. He never said that.
Is there jurisdictional competition sometimes between the county, the sheriff, and the city?
Well, I'm
So
sure there might be some internal politics. There always is. But when you look at the logistics, the sheriff's office is right down the hallway from the chief of police office. If we have something to talk about, it should be an easy deal.
And the main difference too is that you run the jail, right? You run the jail, not the city, or is there city jail separate from the county jail?
There is no city jail. So everybody that gets arrested comes down to the county. So the sheriff actually is responsible for the court services, the jail, and the cities. And there are a few cities that don't have their own police departments, which they also provide services for. So, that's why I'm saying when you look at the breakdown of the manpower, how are we spreading that out in terms of coverage for the city? I have no idea how we've gotten away for so long with 200 and some odd deputies and 1.3 million people, and it hasn't gotten worse sooner.
What should the number be, and how does it compare to Ramsey County or other counties around the country that you have looked at?
Realistically, the number given the population should be right around 2,400 patrol deputies.
Really?
Now we know but we know because of budget restraints that we won't be there right away, but we need to figure out how to at least get to the point where we're able to control what's happening. I mean, when you look at Minneapolis,
include the cities, or 2,400 in addition to what cities and towns have?
Including what we have, right? Because right now we have 500 jail correction staff, right? And then we have 270 plus the sheriff in patrol. But what's important about that is that these guys are down at the Metrodome or the U.S. Bank Stadium or Target Field, and that's what we see them. We see them when they're patrolling and giving out subpoenas and things of that nature. But we don't see them actively in the community unless you're in like Brooklyn Park, further out in Dayton, Osseo area. And we need that proactive policing in the community. Listen, you don't always have to get out the car and do something. But if people constantly see different squad cars coming, they know to think twice about doing something. It's that proactive that we need to have out there. And most importantly, I'm always preaching to cops, get out and meet the people. Park the car, go meet the people. And then and work with the city to figure things out. Now we know that losing the 3rd precinct was devastating. It was a turning point in what was happening that day, right? But how important is it now to secure that police department and open it back up, right? And most importantly, my pet peeve has always been about the 3rd precinct is that, listen, I'm up and down that block all the time. I see people laying on the ground in hot weather, sun, cold. I see cops riding past in squad cars, windows up. They don't even stop to make sure the people are okay. You have to have compassion for the people. You don't have to be a police officer to care whether somebody's laying there dead or not, or if they need water. You just have to be a person, and we have to be more personable to do this job.
Joe Banks, good conversation, man. Good to see you. Good presentation. Let's put up your contact information. So if people want to find out more or support you, contribute to your campaign, they know how to do that. Maybe, Voss, you can put up that information for the campaign so people can know how to connect with and support Joseph Banks, candidate for Sheriff of Hennepin County. And I want to also thank Pat Sukum for your work with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Thank you for your presentation, your excellent presentation today, for the energy, the empathy, the vibe that you're presenting in creating value for relationships between younger people and older people to create the kind of community that we all want. Is there a phone number that we can send people to, or email that we can send people to support your organization? I thought we saw it. BIGSTwinCities.org. If you want to connect, support, find out, BIGSTwinCities.org. With that, Diana, Dee, Brenda, thank you so much. Thank you, Vash Bodie. And thanks to our guests, Joe Banks and Pat Sukum. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.